My name is Margaret Thompson. I am 64 years old, and 3 days ago, my life changed forever with 6 numbers worth $47 million. I sat in my small kitchen, the winning ticket trembling between my fingers, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But even as the shock washed over me like a tidal wave, one decision crystallized in my mind with absolute clarity. My son David would never know. You see, for the past 5 years, ever since his wife Sarah entered our lives, I've become nothing more than free child care. A grandmother whose only value comes from her availability to watch little Emma and Jason whenever it's convenient for them. And when I finally said no, when I finally stood up for myself just once, David blocked my number like I was some stranger who'd wronged him. He has no idea that the woman he discarded, the mother he threw away, just became a millionaire. And here's what you won't believe. Before I spend a single dollar of that fortune, I decided to test him. I wanted to see who my son really was when he thought I had nothing left to lose. The answer nearly destroyed me, but it also set me free. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The ticket sat on my kitchen table for hours that first night. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at those numbers. 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and 42. Numbers I'd been playing for 3 years, the ages David and his sister Linda had been at different milestones. Ironic, isn't it? The children who had grown up to treat me like hired help had inadvertently made me rich. I poured myself a glass of wine, the cheap kind from the corner store, and tried to process what had just happened. $47 million. After taxes, maybe 30. Still more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. For a moment, I wanted to call someone, to share the joy, to celebrate. But who would I call? David had blocked me. Linda lived across the country and barely returned my calls. My sister Patricia would have the whole neighborhood talking before I hung up the phone. The silence of my small apartment pressed in around me. Just me, the ticking clock, and the slip of paper that had changed everything. I thought about the last conversation I'd had with David 2 weeks ago, the one that ended with him cutting me out of his life entirely. "Mom, we need you to watch the kids this Saturday," he'd said, not asked. Never asked anymore. "Sarah's got her book club and I have a golf tournament." I'd taken a deep breath, gathering courage I'd been building for months. "David, I can't. I have plans with my friend Helen. We're going to the museum." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then his voice cold and sharp. "Plans? Mom, we're talking about your grandchildren here. Helen can wait." "No, David. For once, Helen can't wait. I've canceled on her 4 times in the past month because you and Sarah needed a babysitter. I'm tired of being taken for granted." "Taken for granted?" His laugh was bitter. "We're giving you time with Emma and Jason. Most grandmothers would be grateful. Most grandmothers get asked, not told. Most grandmothers get thanked, not criticized when they dare to have their own lives." That's when his voice turned cruel, the way it did when he didn't get his way. "You know what, Mom? Fine. If that's how you feel, don't worry about it. We'll find someone who actually wants to help family." The line went dead. That was 2 weeks ago, and my phone had been silent ever since. 2 weeks of wondering if I'd made the right choice, if standing up for myself was worth losing my grandchildren. 2 weeks of questioning everything. Now, staring at that lottery ticket, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the power that comes from money, but the power that comes from having options. For the first time since David had become an adult, I held all the cards. I took another sip of wine and made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't tell David about the money, not yet. Instead, I would test him. I would see if the son I'd raised still existed somewhere beneath the entitled man he'd become. I would discover if he loved me for who I was, or if I'd been right all along, that I was nothing more than a convenience to him. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my best outfit, a navy blue dress I'd worn to church for years, and drove to the lottery office downtown. The building was unremarkable, gray concrete and tinted windows, but inside waited the validation of my new reality. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled as I approached her window. "How can I help you today?" she asked. I slid the ticket across the counter, my hands steadier than they had been the night before. "I believe this is a winner." She scanned it, her eyebrows rising slightly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Thompson. This is indeed a winning ticket. Would you like to claim it today?" Yes, but I'd like to remain anonymous if possible. She nodded professionally. We can arrange that? Let me get the forms. As I filled out paperwork, I thought about the test I was about to conduct. It felt manipulative, even cruel. But David had taught me to be this way. Years of being dismissed, ignored, and taken for granted had hardened something inside me. If he wanted to play games with my emotions, I could play games too. The process took hours: taxes, legal documents, bank transfers. By late afternoon, I was officially worth more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. But the number in my account felt abstract, meaningless. What mattered was what I planned to do next. That evening, I sat in my living room with a yellow notepad, planning my strategy. I would call David, but not about the money. I would call him pretending to be in crisis, needing his help. I would see if the son who had blocked me for refusing to babysit would come to his mother's aid when she truly needed him. But first, I needed to make the crisis believable. I looked around my modest apartment, at the furniture I'd accumulated over decades, the photographs of better times, the small life I'd built for myself after David's father left us. This apartment would be the centerpiece of my test. I picked up the phone and dialed my landlord, Mr. Peterson. He was a decent man, fair but firm about rent. We'd spoken many times over the years about repairs and lease renewals. Mr. Peterson, this is Margaret Thompson in 4B. I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll help me. I'd like to give you notice that I'll be moving out at the end of the month, but I need you to call my son and tell him you're evicting me for non-payment of rent. There was a pause. Mrs. Thompson, I don't understand. Your rent is always on time. I know, this is a family matter. I need my son to believe I'm in financial trouble. Would you be willing to make that call for me? I'll pay you for your time. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Thompson, I don't know what's going on between you and your son, but I've seen enough family drama in this business to know it's not my place to judge. If you need me to make that call, I'll do it. No payment necessary. I gave him David's work number, knowing he'd be more likely to answer a call from someone he didn't recognize. Tell him I'm 3 months behind on rent and you need to speak with family members about collecting what I owe. The next phase was medical. I called my doctor's office and made an appointment for a routine checkup, but I asked the receptionist to leave a message for David when she confirmed the appointment. Tell him his mother has some test results to discuss and needs family support for upcoming medical decisions. I wasn't lying exactly. I did have test results, all normal, and I was making medical decisions about preventive care, but I knew how David would interpret the message, especially coming so soon after a call about unpaid rent. The final piece was the most painful. I called Emma's school, where I'd been listed as an emergency contact since kindergarten, and asked them to remove my name. There's been a family situation, I explained to the secretary. I won't be available for emergencies anymore. When she asked who should replace me as the backup contact, I said, they'll need to figure that out themselves. By Thursday evening, I'd set all the pieces in motion. Now, I just had to wait and see if David would reach out to the mother he'd discarded, or if his silence would continue. The lottery ticket sat in my purse, a secret that grew heavier with each passing hour. Friday morning, my phone rang. The number was blocked, but I knew it was David. My heart pounded as I answered. Mom? His voice was tight, strained. I got some weird calls yesterday. I forced my voice to sound tired, defeated. Oh, David, I didn't expect to hear from you. Mom, your landlord called me. He said you're behind on rent. And Dr. Martinez's office called about test results? What's going on? I let silence stretch between us, imagining him shifting uncomfortably in his office chair. I didn't want to bother you. You made it clear I'm not supposed to call anymore. That's not... Mom, just tell me what's happening. I took a shaky breath, preparing for the performance of my life. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. The company downsized, and they let all the older employees go first. I've been trying to find something else, but who wants to hire a 64-year-old woman? The rent is due, and I don't have it. I haven't had it for months. Mom, why didn't you tell me? The concern in his voice was real, but I wondered if it was concern for me or concern about being inconvenienced. You blocked my number, David. How was I supposed to tell you? Another pause. The medical stuff. The doctor's office said something about test results. I closed my eyes, hating myself for what I was about to say. They found some irregularities in my blood work. I have to go in for more tests next week. The doctor wants to discuss treatment options. Treatment for what? I don't know yet, but David, I can't afford the tests. I don't have insurance anymore since I lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was different, calculating. Mom, how much do you need for the rent? $1,500 for this month, plus the 2 months I'm behind. $4,500 total. But David, I can't ask you for that. I know you have your own family to think about. And the medical stuff? The tests alone will be over $2,000. The doctor won't even see me without payment up front. I heard him typing, probably calculating, weighing the cost against the inconvenience. Mom, I need to talk to Sarah. Can I call you back? My heart sank. He needed to check with his wife before helping his own mother. Of course. I understand you need to discuss it. I'll call you tonight. After he hung up, I sat staring at the phone. The son I'd raised wouldn't have needed to consult anyone about helping his mother in crisis. He would have been in his car already, driving over with a checkbook and a hug. But that son seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a man who weighed every decision against its impact on his wife's approval. That evening, David called back. I could hear Sarah in the background, her voice sharp with irritation. Mom, we've talked it over. We can help with the rent, but not all of it. We can give you $1,500 for this month, but you'll need to work something out with your landlord about the back rent. And the medical tests? Mom, you should apply for Medicaid. There are programs for people in your situation. People in my situation, as if being older and unemployed made me a different class of person, someone who belonged in government programs, rather than someone worthy of her son's help. David, Medicaid takes months to approve. The doctor wants to do the tests next week. Maybe you could ask Linda to help with that part. Linda, who lived 3,000 miles away and had her own struggles. David was passing the buck, dividing the responsibility so he wouldn't have to carry it alone. I'll think about it, I said quietly. And Mom? You need to start looking seriously for work. Maybe something part-time, retail or something. You can't expect us to support you long-term. Support me. As if helping his mother in a medical crisis was the same as supporting a lazy relative who wouldn't work. As if the woman who had raised him alone after his father left, who had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, who had given him every advantage she could, was now just another burden to manage. I understand, David. We'll bring the check by tomorrow. Sarah wants to talk to you about some things. After we hung up, I poured myself another glass of wine and opened my laptop. I researched the most expensive retirement communities in the area, the kind of places where wealthy families sent parents they wanted to forget about. Places with long waiting lists and monthly fees that cost more than most people's salaries. Tomorrow, when David brought his check, I would be ready for the next phase of my test. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood. I dressed in my oldest clothes, wrinkled my hair to look unkempt, and scattered unpaid bills across my coffee table. When David and Sarah arrived at 11 a.m., I answered the door looking every bit the desperate woman I was pretending to be. Sarah pushed past me without a greeting, her eyes immediately scanning the apartment with barely concealed disgust. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, her highlighted hair perfectly styled despite the rain. Margaret, she said, not bothering with Mom anymore. We need to talk. David hung back, looking uncomfortable. He handed me an envelope without making eye contact. The $1,500 for this month's rent. I took it with trembling hands, genuine emotion mixing with my performance. $1,500 when I had $30 million sitting in the bank. The irony was suffocating. Sarah settled onto my couch as if she owned it, her expression cold and businesslike. Margaret, David and I have been discussing your situation, and we think it's time to make some serious changes. I sat across from them, clutching the envelope. What kind of changes? Well, first, you need to accept that your independence days are over. You're 64, unemployed, and apparently in poor health. It's time to start thinking about assisted living. The words hit me like a physical blow. Assisted living. They wanted to warehouse me, to put me somewhere they could visit occasionally and feel good about themselves. Sarah, I just need help getting back on my feet. Once I find a job, who's going to hire you? She interrupted. Be realistic, Margaret. You're too old for most employers. Even if you find something, it'll be minimum wage. You'll never be able to afford this apartment and medical care." David finally spoke up, his voice weak. "Mom, Sarah's right. We've looked into some places. There's a nice facility in Riverside. It's affordable. Affordable, code for cheap. The kind of place where they put people they want to forget about." "What about Emma and Jason?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I won't be able to see them if I'm in Riverside." Sarah's smile was sharp as glass. "Margaret, let's be honest. You've made it clear that babysitting is a burden for you. This way, everyone gets what they want. You get taken care of, and we get reliable childcare that doesn't come with guilt trips." "Guilt trips?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "Sarah, I watched your children for free for 5 years. I rearranged my entire life around your schedule. The one time I said no, David blocked my number. And look where saying no got you," she shot back. "If you'd been more flexible, more grateful for the opportunity to spend time with your grandchildren, maybe David would have been more willing to help when you really needed it." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife she'd gone too far. Instead, he stared at his hands, a coward who'd let his wife speak for him. "David," I said softly, "is this what you want? To put me away somewhere?" He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. Resignation, relief, the look of a man who'd found a solution to an inconvenient problem. "Mom, it's not about what I want. It's about what's practical. You need care we can't provide. The facility in Riverside has medical staff, activities, people your age. You might actually be happier there." Happier, isolated from everyone I loved, surrounded by strangers, forgotten except for obligatory holiday visits. That was his definition of happiness for his mother. Sarah pulled out a folder she'd brought with her. "We've already filled out the preliminary paperwork. The facility has an opening next month. The monthly fee is $2,800, which is less than you're paying for this apartment plus utilities." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. They'd planned this entire conversation. They'd come here not to help me, but to dispose of me as efficiently as possible. What if I don't want to go? Sarah's voice turned ice cold. "Then you'll be homeless. Because David and I can't keep subsidizing your life choices. We have our own children to think about, college funds to build, a future to secure. We can't be responsible for you indefinitely. I'm not asking you to be responsible for me indefinitely. I'm asking for help getting through a rough patch. Margaret, this isn't a rough patch. This is your new reality. The sooner you accept it, the better for everyone." I looked at David again, this stranger who wore my son's face. "And if I go to this facility, will you visit? Will you bring Emma and Jason?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Of course, Mom. When we can. You know how busy things get with the kids' schedules and everything." When they can, which would be never, or close to it. I would disappear into that facility like thousands of other inconvenient parents, forgotten until it was time to clear out my room after I died. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 64 years. "I need time to think about this." "Don't take too long," Sarah said, gathering her papers. "The facility needs an answer by the end of the week, and you need to be out of this apartment by the end of the month regardless." After they left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, their words echoing in my head. Assisted living. Too old to hire. New reality. The envelope with $1,500 sat on the table like a bribe, payment to go quietly into the exile they had planned for me. I picked up my phone and called the lottery office. "This is Margaret Thompson. I claimed a winning ticket yesterday. I need to speak with someone about setting up a trust." It was time for the final phase of my test. David and Sarah thought they held all the cards, but they had no idea that the game had already changed. They wanted to put me away, to erase me from their lives as cleanly as possible. Instead, I was about to show them exactly what they'd thrown away. The woman at the lottery office connected me with their legal department. Within an hour, I had an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in anonymous trusts and estate planning. By Monday, I would have everything in place for the revelation that would change everything. That night, I called my sister Linda in California. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm with genuine concern. "Maggie, I've been worried about you. David called and said you were having some problems." I almost broke then, almost told her everything. Instead, I said, Linda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me. Can you fly out here next weekend? I'll pay for the ticket. Something's happening, and I need family here. Real family. Of course. Maggie, what's wrong? You sound different. Everything's wrong, but it's also about to be very right. Just trust me, okay? And Linda, don't tell David you're coming. This needs to be a surprise. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began researching something I'd never thought I'd need: how to disinherit adult children. The lawyer would help with the legal aspects, but I wanted to understand my options. David and Sarah had made their choice. Now, I would make mine. The lottery ticket had given me more than money. It had given me clarity, power, and the ability to choose who deserved my love and who had forfeited it through their actions. The test was almost complete, and David had failed, more spectacularly than I'd ever imagined possible. But the final exam was still to come. Monday morning, I met with the lawyer in his downtown office. James Mitchell was a distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen enough family drama to remain professionally neutral while still showing human compassion. Mrs. Thompson, he said, settling behind his mahogany desk, I understand you've recently come into a significant sum and want to discuss estate planning. That's correct. But it's more complicated than simple estate planning. I need to protect this money from family members who've proven they can't be trusted with it. I told him everything: the years of being taken for granted, the blocked phone number, the test I'd conducted, and David's response to my fake crisis. When I described their visit on Saturday and their plan to put me in assisted living, his expression darkened. Mrs. Thompson, what you're describing is elder abuse. Not physical abuse, but emotional and financial manipulation designed to isolate and control you. Can I legally disinherit him completely? Yes, but I'd recommend a more strategic approach. Complete disinheritance can be challenged in court, especially by children who claim they were providing care. However, we can structure your estate in ways that make challenges nearly impossible while also sending a clear message about why you made these decisions. He outlined several options: a charitable trust that would make David's inheritance dependent on meeting specific conditions he'd never fulfill, a foundation in my name that would support causes I cared about, provisions that would leave him a symbolic dollar, along with a letter explaining exactly why he'd been excluded. The key, James explained, is documentation. Every interaction, every conversation, every decision they make regarding your welfare needs to be recorded and preserved. If this goes to court, you want the judge to see clearly who your son really is. By the end of our meeting, I had a plan that was both legally bulletproof and emotionally satisfying. The trust would be established immediately, protecting the money from any claims. A foundation would be created to support programs for abandoned elderly parents and neglected grandparents. And David would inherit exactly what he'd given me: nothing of real value. There's one more thing, I told James as we wrapped up. I want to confront them directly. I want them to know what they've lost and why. Can we arrange that in a way that's legally protected? He smiled for the first time during our meeting. Mrs. Thompson, I've been practicing family law for 25 years, and I've never met anyone more justified in their anger or more strategic in their response. Yes, we can arrange a confrontation that will be both devastating and legally airtight. How long will it take to set everything up? 2 weeks, and Mrs. Thompson, when you're ready to reveal the truth to your son, I'd like to be there. This is going to be the most satisfying conversation of my career. That afternoon, I called David. He answered on the first ring, probably hoping I was calling to accept their assisted living plan. Mom, have you thought about what we discussed? I have, David. I've made my decision. I'd like you and Sarah to come over Saturday afternoon. There are some papers I need to sign, and I want to discuss the transition. I could hear the relief in his voice. That's great, Mom. I know this is hard, but you're making the right choice. You'll be much happier at Riverside. I'm sure I will be. Oh, and David, I've asked Linda to fly in for the weekend. I want her here when I sign the papers. Linda's coming. Why? Because she's family, and this is an important moment. I want her support. There was a pause. I could practically hear him calculating whether Linda's presence would complicate their plans. Finally, he said, Of course. It'll be good to see her. After we hung up, I called Linda to confirm her flight details. She was arriving Friday night, and I planned to tell her everything before the confrontation with David. I would need her support, her witness, and her strength for what was coming. The next 2 weeks passed slowly. I spent my time planning, documenting, and preparing. I wrote letters to Emma and Jason, to be delivered when they turned 18, explaining why their grandmother had disappeared from their lives and who was responsible. I researched the assisted living facility David had chosen, discovering it had a waiting list for good rooms and that the cheapest options were little better than warehouses for the unwanted elderly. I also spent time with James, refining our strategy. We would record the entire confrontation, with Linda as a witness. David and Sarah would be presented with documents showing the lottery win, the trust establishment, and their complete exclusion from any inheritance. But first, they would be allowed to reveal more of their true selves, to dig their hole even deeper. Friday evening, I picked Linda up at the airport. She hugged me tight, and I nearly broke down right there in the terminal. It had been 6 months since I'd seen her, and I'd forgotten what it felt like to be embraced by someone who loved me unconditionally. "Maggie, you look different," she said, studying my face as we walked to my car. "Older, but also stronger, somehow." "I am stronger than I've ever been, and tomorrow you're going to see why." That night, sitting in my living room with tea and the box of tissues Linda had insisted on buying, I told her everything. The lottery ticket, the test, David's response, the assisted living plan. By the time I finished, Linda was furious. "Maggie, I can't believe this. David was such a sweet boy. What happened to him?" "Sarah happened to him, but Linda, she didn't create his selfishness. She just gave him permission to express it." "So tomorrow, you're going to tell them about the money?" "Tomorrow, I'm going to show them exactly what they threw away, and you're going to watch them realize they destroyed their relationship with their mother for nothing." Linda gripped my hand. "I'm proud of you, Maggie. Mom and Dad would be proud too. You raised David better than this. It's not your fault he chose to forget those lessons." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring pain, anger, and the end of relationships that had already died. But it would also bring justice, closure, and the beginning of a life lived on my own terms. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the universe was providing perfect lighting for the drama about to unfold. Linda helped me set up the living room, positioning chairs so everyone would be facing each other, placing the recorder James had given me in an inconspicuous spot where it would capture everything. At exactly 2 p.m., David and Sarah arrived. They brought a folder thick with paperwork and expressions of barely concealed satisfaction. David hugged me briefly, the kind of obligatory embrace you give someone you're about to dispose of. Sarah air-kissed my cheek, already mentally decorating my apartment for the estate sale. "Linda," David said, turning to his aunt with more warmth than he'd shown me. "It's so good to see you." Linda hugged him, but I caught her expression over his shoulder. She was studying him like a scientist examining an interesting but distasteful specimen. "David, Sarah," Linda said carefully. "Margaret's told me about your plans for her." "It's really for the best," Sarah said, settling into my favorite chair as if she owned it. "Margaret needs more care than we can provide, and Riverside has excellent facilities." "Excellent facilities," Linda repeated, "for someone you consider a burden." David shifted uncomfortably. "Aunt Linda, it's not that simple. Mom's situation has changed. She needs professional help now." "Professional help for what, exactly?" Sarah opened her folder with efficient movements. "Well, there's her employment situation, her health issues, her inability to manage her finances independently. She's becoming a danger to herself." I watched Linda's jaw tighten. "A danger to herself? Margaret, is that how you see it?" This was my moment. I looked around the room at the 3 people who would witness the end of one story and the beginning of another. "No, Linda, I don't see it that way at all. In fact, I see things very differently than I did 2 weeks ago." I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with the folder James had prepared for me. "David, Sarah, before we discuss Riverside, there's something I need to show you." I handed David the first document, a copy of my lottery claim, complete with the winning numbers, the date, and the amount. 3 weeks ago, I won the lottery, $47 million. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at the paper, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Sarah grabbed the document from his hands, scanning it frantically. This has to be fake," Sarah stammered. "Margaret, what kind of game is this?" I handed her the second document, a bank statement showing the post-tax amount sitting in my account. It's not a game, Sarah. It's the truth. David found his voice first, though it came out as a croak. Mom, if this is real, why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if you loved me, or if you just saw me as free childcare and an eventual inheritance. The color drained from David's face. Mom, that's not. We were trying to help you. Help me? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. David, you blocked my number because I refused to babysit one Saturday. When I called you desperate, supposedly broke and sick, you offered $1,500 and wanted to warehouse me in the cheapest facility you could find. Sarah was frantically reading through the bank documents, her designer composure cracking. Margaret, if you have this money, everything changes. We can work something out. You don't need to go to Riverside. You're absolutely right, Sarah. I don't need to go anywhere. In fact, I've already made other arrangements. I handed them the third document, the trust paperwork showing that the entire fortune had been placed in an irrevocable charitable trust, with myself as the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. What does this mean? David asked, though his voice suggested he was beginning to understand. It means the money is protected. It can't be touched by anyone else, it can't be inherited, and it can't be used as leverage against me ever again. Linda had been sitting silently, watching David and Sarah process this information. Now she spoke, her voice cutting through their shock like a blade. David, do you understand what you've done? Your mother tested you, and you failed completely. She gave you the chance to show love, compassion, and loyalty, and instead you showed greed, selfishness, and cruelty. Aunt Linda, that's not fair, David protested. We were trying to do what was best for Mom. What was best for you? Linda corrected. What was convenient for you? What would get an inconvenient elderly mother out of your way with the least possible effort and expense? Sarah had recovered enough to shift into damage control mode. Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We never wanted to get rid of you. We just thought you'd be happier with professional care. Professional care that costs $2,800 a month, I said quietly. About half what I just spent on a new car. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain, revealing a brand new Mercedes sitting in the driveway. I bought it yesterday, paid cash, along with this building, which I'm converting into affordable housing for seniors. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You bought the building? I bought the building. I bought a house in Florida for Linda. I've established scholarship funds at 3 colleges and donated $2 million to programs that help abandoned elderly parents reconnect with their families. I turned back to face them, and for the first time in years, I felt truly powerful. The only thing I haven't bought is a relationship with my son, because apparently that's not for sale. Sarah tried one more approach, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she probably used with difficult clients. Margaret, I know we handled this badly. We were stressed about your situation, and maybe we didn't communicate well, but now that everything's changed, we can start over. Start over? I repeated. Sarah, you told me my independence days were over. You said I was too old to hire, too much of a burden to support. You planned to put me away like a broken piece of furniture you didn't want to deal with anymore. I was trying to be practical. You were trying to be rid of me, and you succeeded. Congratulations. David finally found his voice again, and when he spoke, I heard the petulant child he'd been, the one who threw tantrums when he didn't get his way. Mom, this isn't fair. You lied to us. You made us think you were broke and sick. I told you exactly what millions of elderly parents face every day: job loss, medical problems, financial stress. The only difference is that I had a safety net you didn't know about. And your response to my crisis showed me everything I needed to know about who you've become. Linda stood up, moving to stand beside me. David, your mother raised you alone after your father left. She worked 2 jobs to put you through college. She gave up her own dreams to make sure you had every opportunity. And the first time she needed help, you tried to discard her like garbage. That's not what we were doing, Sarah snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. We were trying to solve a problem. Margaret was becoming a financial drain, and we have our own family to think about. The room fell silent. Even David looked shocked by his wife's words. There it is, I said softly. The truth. I was a problem to be solved, a drain to be eliminated. Thank you for finally being honest, Sarah. I walked to my desk and pulled out one final folder. Since we're being honest, let me share some honesty of my own. This is my new will. I handed David a single page. You'll inherit exactly $1, along with a letter explaining why. The rest will go to charity when I die, which hopefully won't be for many years. Years I'll spend traveling, learning, and enjoying the company of people who actually care about me. David read the page, his hands shaking. Mom, you can't do this. I already have. It's been notarized and filed. Your children will receive trust funds for college, but only if they maintain a relationship with me independent of you and Sarah. If you try to use them as weapons against me, they forfeit the money. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration. This is insane. You're punishing us for trying to help you. I'm protecting myself from people who see me as a commodity rather than a human being. People who measure my worth by my usefulness to them. Linda put her arm around my shoulders. Maggie's going to be just fine without you. Better than fine, actually. David looked around the room desperately, as if searching for something that would fix the disaster his life had just become. Mom, please. Let's talk about this. We can work something out. The time for working things out was 2 weeks ago, when you thought I was desperate. The David I raised would have moved heaven and earth to help his mother in crisis. The David sitting in my living room calculated the minimum amount he could spend to make the problem go away. I walked to the door and opened it. I think this conversation is over. Margaret, you're making a mistake, Sarah said, gathering her useless paperwork. You're going to be alone. Who's going to take care of you when you're really sick? Who's going to be there for you? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. The same people who were there for me when I thought I had nothing. Linda, my true friends, the community I'm going to build with this money. People who love me for who I am, not what I can provide. David paused at the threshold, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mom, what about Emma and Jason? What about them? You blocked my number, remember? You made it clear that my relationship with them was contingent on my usefulness to you. Well, I'm no longer useful, so I guess they're no longer my problem. You can't punish the kids for our mistakes. I'm not punishing them, I'm protecting myself. When they're 18, they can decide for themselves if they want a relationship with their grandmother. Until then, they're your responsibility, not mine. After they left, Linda and I sat in the quiet apartment, both of us emotionally drained. The recorder had captured everything. Sarah's admission that I was a financial drain. David's attempts to manipulate me, even after learning about the money. Their complete lack of remorse for the pain they'd caused. How do you feel? Linda asked. Free, I said immediately. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. Any regrets? I thought about that seriously. I regret that David became the kind of person who could treat his mother this way. I regret that Emma and Jason are being raised by people with so little empathy, but I don't regret protecting myself from them. What now? Now I live, I travel, I help other people in situations like mine. I use this money to build something meaningful instead of watching it drain away to people who don't deserve it. That evening, Linda and I sat on my new balcony. I'd already spoken to the contractor about expanding the apartment, drinking wine that cost more than David's rent contribution, and planning my new life. The lottery had given me money, but the test had given me something more valuable, certainty about who deserved my love and who had forfeited it. 3 months later, I received a call from Emma's school. She was in the hospital, injured in a playground accident, and they couldn't reach David or Sarah. The school secretary asked if I could come. I hung up the phone and sat quietly for a long moment. Then I called my driver. Yes, I have a driver now. And went to the hospital. Not because David deserved my help, but because Emma deserved her grandmother. When I arrived, I found my granddaughter alone in the emergency room, a nurse sitting beside her while they waited for her parents to arrive. Emma's face lit up when she saw me. Grandma, I missed you so much. I held her carefully, mindful of her injured arm, and felt my heart break a little. I missed you too, sweetheart. Daddy said you moved away and didn't want to see us anymore. I looked into her innocent eyes and made a decision. Emma, that's not true. I've been right here all along, and I always will be. When David and Sarah finally arrived, their faces were a mixture of relief and anger. They wanted to demand I leave, but they couldn't risk making a scene in front of Emma. Later, in the hospital corridor, David approached me. "Mom, thank you for coming. I know things have been difficult. Things have been honest," I corrected, for the first time in years. "Emma's been asking about you. She doesn't understand why you disappeared." "Then maybe you should tell her the truth, that you decided I wasn't worth having in your lives." He looked older, worn down by the consequences of his choices. "Mom, is there any way we can fix this?" I studied his face, looking for genuine remorse, real understanding of what he had done. Instead, I saw calculation, the same weighing of costs and benefits that had driven all his decisions about me. "David, do you understand why I tested you? You wanted to see if we really cared about you. No, I wanted to see if the son I raised still existed somewhere inside the man you became, and I got my answer. I do care about you, Mom. You care about what I can provide, my money, my usefulness, my inheritance. You've never cared about me as a person. That's not true. Prove it. Come see me regularly, not when you need something. Call me just to talk, not when you want favors. Show Emma and Jason that their grandmother matters to you, not as a babysitter or an ATM, but as a human being you love. And if I do that, then maybe, in time, we can rebuild something. But, David, I'm not desperate anymore. I'm not lonely or afraid or dependent on your approval. If you want a relationship with me, you'll have to earn it." 6 months have passed since that conversation. David calls occasionally, awkward conversations where he tries to prove he's changed. Sarah avoids me entirely, which is fine by me. I see Emma and Jason every few weeks, building relationships with them independent of their parents' drama. I've traveled to 12 countries, funded 3 homeless shelters, and bought a small house near Linda in California, where I spend my winters. I've learned to paint, taken cooking classes, and started writing a book about family dynamics and elder abuse. Most importantly, I've learned that love without respect is worthless, that family obligations go both ways, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequences of their own choices. David failed my test, but in doing so, he taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. I don't need anyone who doesn't need me for the right reasons. The lottery gave me financial freedom, but his betrayal gave me something even more precious: emotional freedom. I am Margaret Thompson. I am 64 years old. I am worth $47 million. And for the first time in my adult life, I am completely, authentically, joyfully free. The boy who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories grew up to be a man who saw me as a burden to be managed. But his failure to love me properly taught me how to love myself. And that, it turns out, was worth more than all the lottery money in the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from getting what we want, but from learning what we truly deserve.